According to Wikipedia, the first record that something was abnormal on the Flannan Isles was on 15 December 1900 when the steamer Archer, on a passage from Philadelphia to Leith, noted in its log that the light was not operational in poor weather conditions. When the ship docked in Leith on 18 December 1900, the sighting was passed on to the Northern Lighthouse Board. The relief vessel, the lighthouse tender Hesperus, was unable to sail from Briskleet, Lewis, as planned on 20 December due to adverse weather. It did not reach the island until noon on 26 December. The lighthouse was manned by 3 men, James Ducat, Thomas Marshall, and William MacArthur, with a rotating 4th man spending time on shore. On arrival, the crew and relief keeper found that the flagstaff had no flag. All of the usual provision boxes had been left on the landing stage for restocking, and more ominously, none of the lighthouse keepers were there to welcome them ashore. James Harvey, the captain of Hesperus, attempted to reach them by blowing the ship's whistle and firing a flare, but was unsuccessful.
A boat was launched and Jos Moore, the relief keeper, was put ashore alone. He found the entrance gate to the compound and the main door both closed, the beds unmade, and the clock stopped. Returning to the landing stage with this grim news, he then went back up to the lighthouse with Hesperus' second mate and a seaman. A further search revealed that the lamps had been cleaned and refilled. A set of oilskins was found, suggesting that one of the keepers had left the lighthouse without them. There was no sign of any of the keepers, neither inside the lighthouse nor anywhere on the island.
Moore and 3 volunteer seamen were left on the island to attend the light, and Hesperus returned to Lewis. Captain Harvey sent a telegram to the Northern Lighthouse Board dated 26 December 1900, stating, "A dreadful accident has happened at the Flannans. The 3 keepers, Ducat, Marshall, and the occasional have disappeared from the island. The clocks were stopped and other signs indicated that the accident must have happened about a week ago. Poor fellows, they must have been blown over the cliffs or drowned trying to secure a crane." On Eilean Mor, the men scoured every corner of the island for clues as to the fate of the keepers. They found that everything was intact at the east landing, but the west landing provided considerable evidence of damage caused by recent storms. A box at 33 meters 10.8 above sea level had been broken, and its contents strewn about. Iron railings were bent over. The iron railway by the path was wrenched out of its concrete, and a rock weighing more than a ton had been displaced. On top of the cliff at more than 60 meters 200 feet above sea level, turf had been ripped away as far as 10 meters 33 from the cliff edge.
No bodies were ever found. There have been some mysterious sights resulting in fascinated national speculation in newspapers and periodicals of the era. Implausible stories ensued, such as a sea serpent or giant seabird had carried the men away. They had arranged for a ship to take them away and start new lives. They had been abducted by foreign spies, or they had met their fate through the malevolent presence of a boat filled with ghosts. The baleful influence of the Phantom of the 7 Hunters was widely suspected locally. More than 10 years later, the events were still being commemorated and elaborated on. The 1912 ballad Flannan Isle by Wilfred Wilson Gibson refers erroneously to an overturned chair and uneaten meal laid out on the table, indicating that the keepers had been suddenly disturbed. Yet, as we crowded through the door, we only saw a table spread for dinner, meat and cheese and bread, but all untouched and no one there, as though, when they sat down to eat, that they could even taste. Alarm had come, and they in haste had risen and left the bread and meat, for at the table head a chair lay tumbled on the floor.
However, in a first-hand account made by Moore, the relief keeper, he stated that the kitchen utensils were all very clean, which is a sign that it must be after dinner sometime they left. On 29 December 1900, Robert Marr had, Northern Lighthouse Board and LB Superintendent, arrived to conduct the official investigation into the incident. Mor had originally recruited all three of the missing men and knew them personally. He examined the clothing left behind in the lighthouse and concluded that James Ducat and Thomas Marshall had gone down to the western landing stage, and that Donald MacArthur the occasional had left the lighthouse during heavy rain in his shirt sleeves. He noted that whoever left the light last and unattended was in breach of an LB rules. He also noted that some of the damage to the west landing was difficult to believe unless actually seen. From evidence which I was able to procure, I was satisfied that the men had been on duty up till dinner time on Saturday the 15th of December. That they had gone down to secure a box in which the mooring ropes, landing ropes were kept, and which was secured in a crevice in the rock about 110.34 above sea level, and that an extra-large sea had rushed up the face of the rock, had gone above them, and coming down with immense force, had swept them completely away. Whether this explanation brought any comfort to the families of the lost keepers, Ducat left a wife and 4 children. MacArthur, a wife and 2 children, is unknown. Over time, a story has developed of the existence of unusual logbook entries. They supposedly have Thomas Marshall saying on December 12 that there were severe wines, the likes of which I have never seen before in 20 years. He also is said to have reported that James Ducat had been very quiet and Donald MacArthur had been crying. MacArthur was a veteran mariner with a reputation for brawling, and thus it would be strange for him to be crying in response to a storm. Log entries on the 13th of December were said to have stated that the storm was still raging, and that all 3 men had been praying. This was also puzzling, as all 3 men were experienced lighthouse keepers who knew they were in a secure structure 150 feet above sea level and should have known they were safe inside. Furthermore, there had been no reported storms in the area on the 12th, 13th, and 14th of December. The final log entry is said to have been made on the 15th of December, stating a storm ended. God is over all. An investigation by Mike Dash for the Fortune Times revealed that the logbooks were later additions to the story not based on fact. Subsequent researchers have taken into account the geography of the islands. The coastline of Eilean Mor is deeply indented with narrow gullies called U's. The west landing, which is situated in such a U, terminates in a cave. In high seas or storms, water would rush into the cave and then explode out again with considerable force. It was possible MacArthur may have seen a series of large waves approaching the island and, knowing the likely danger to his colleagues, ran down to warn them only to be washed away as well in the violent swell. Recent research by James Love discovered that Marshall was previously fined 5 shillings when his equipment was washed away during a huge gale. It is likely, in seeking to avoid another fine, that he and Ducat tried to secure their equipment during a storm and were swept away as a result. The fate of MacArthur, although required to stay behind to man the lighthouse, can be guessed to be the same. Love speculates that MacArthur probably tried to warn or help his colleagues and was swept away too. This theory also has the advantages of explaining the set of oilskins remaining indoors and MacArthur's coat remaining on its peg, although perhaps not the closed door and gate. Another theory is based on the first-hand experiences of Walter Aldebert, a keeper on the Flannans from 1953 to 1957. He believed one man may have been washed into the sea, but then his companions, who were trying to rescue him, were washed away by more freak waves. A further proposal is based on the psychology of the keepers. Allegedly, MacArthur was a volatile character. This may have led to a fight breaking out near the cliff edge by the west landing that caused all 3 men to fall to their deaths. Another theory is that one of the men went insane, murdered the other 2, threw their bodies into the sea, and then jumped into his own death. Among modern theories are those connected to paranormal activity, such as abduction by aliens. Fictional use of this premise was featured in the Doctor Who serial horror of Fang Rock. The mystery also was the inspiration for the composer Peter Maxwell Davies' modern chamber opera, The Lighthouse 1979. The British rock group Genesis wrote and recorded The Mystery of Flann and Isle Lighthouse in 1968 while working on their first album, but it was not released until 1998 in Genesis Archive 1967-75. The 2018 film The Vanishing is also based on the same story. The 2019 film directed by Robert Eggers, titled The Lighthouse, also loosely references this tragedy. Personally, I think they went insane for whatever reason. One was having delusions of a storm outside, and somehow convinced the other men there was a storm. That, or they were abducted by aliens.